up in your stance. Like, yeah, here comes the, here comes the, here comes the. Y'all don't really want it like, yeah, here comes the, here comes the, here comes the. Y'all don't really want it like.
Hello there, my awesome dudes and dudettes. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. Jico here, and today I'm bringing you a mathematically correct comparison on the 7 of the most overpowered builds in Baldur's Gate 3. This was a super fun experiment to do. Not only I'll show you in practice what is the damage output you can expect from each build, but I've also spent many hours developing an in-depth spreadsheet detailing the damage output of every build in different scenarios. And I'll show you some cool charts at the end. If you want to download the spreadsheet, the link is in the description. Of course that to make this comparison fair, we need to set some ground rules for the experiment. First, most damage buffs were not allowed, such as haste, elixirs of bloodlust, bless, etc. The only buffs that I used were elixirs of Cloud Giant Strength, because they were essential to some builds and it is relatively easy to get them at late game, and also item activated buffs. So I activated some buffs prior to the fight, such as pre-healing to activate the Broodmother's Revenge Amulet. Secondly, no race benefits were included, such as the Halfling Luck or the Half-Orc Crit Increase. Thirdly, the damage was calculated based on the first round of combat using all the resources available, such as Bardic Inspiration charges and spell slots. Some builds will use more resources while others not as much. I'll mention them in the final considerations. Also, all builds have the Action Surge ability, because I actually think that most of the builds should have them, not only because I wanted to inflate the first turn damage. Differently than the Assassin or Gloomstalker, for example, which I think most builds should not have them, even if it could inflate the first turn damage by a bit. And lastly, we will use the same enemies to compare the damage, the City Guards. They have no resistances and were fairly easy to hit. For the spreadsheet calculations, I considered 99% hit chance, which is basically true for most of the builds, but I'll mention the builds that might have a hard time hitting things sometimes. Before we start, it is important to know that although I did a lot of research and played the game a lot, I'm sure there are a couple ways to min-max this even more. I'm pretty sure most of the improvements wouldn't change the results too much, but please leave your comment down below on how I could make certain builds even better. As always, minor spoiler alert regarding late game items. Now let's meet our contesters. To start off, we have the famous Tavern Brawler Monk with double bonus actions and fighter levels for the extra crit and action surge. Secondly, we have a very similar build that plays extremely different. The Tavern Brawler Troll Barbarian with doubles bonus actions and fighter for the extra crit and action surge. Thirdly, we have the Tomb Raider, a double crossbow wielder with slashing flourishes, extra bonus action and action surge. Now, the only caster in our roster, the Eldritch Blaster with Sorcerer for the Quicken Meta Magic ability and Champion for action surge and extra crit. 4 levels in each to get the 3 feats we need. The Orin Wannabe is only here because of the Ballast Armor that makes all targets vulnerable to piercing damage. It has 8 champion levels for the action surge and crits and 4 levels of Thief for the sneak attacks and extra bonus action. Now the Divine Chanter, my favorite build in the game. More Bard than Paladin, but we will be basically casting only Divine Smites. We have Fighter for the action surge, of course, and this is the only build that I might recommend not leveling up Fighter if you want to keep the level 6 spell slots. Last but not least, we have the Titan String Amazon. Champion for the crits, action surge and extra feat, Bard for the flourishes and 2-war cleric to make good use of our bonus action. Okay, so let's get down to business. We're gonna start with our monk build. I'm gonna quickly show you the items here. Feel free to pause the video if you wanna read the description, and please let me know if I'm not using an item that I should. So monk is very simple. We just punch things and then we flurry of blows with our bonus actions. We're gonna have 2 bonus actions here. We're dealing radiant damage and force damage. Radiant because of our ring and our mindfulness something, and the force damage because of our gloves. Okay, the gloves are super important in this build, as well as the boots, because the boots give us some wisdom modifiers to our hits. As you can see, a lot of damage here. I believe it was something like 70 damage in 1 flurry of blows. We killed the guard, and now we're just gonna hit this other one, critical hit, quite lucky. Action surge. I'm gonna show you the damage with action surge, but in the Excel file you can also find the damage without any extra actions, okay? So you can compare if you don't wanna use action surge every turn or just wanna know how it is without the action surge. So here we have Wolf with 118 hit points. Important die are always amazing. They missed us, and let's hit this Wolf. Okay, about 40 damage, pretty good. Flurry of blows. Let's see if we can finish this off. We have a small chance. hopefully we crit, and critical hit, the wolf is dead. So 120 damage, a little bit more to that wolf. Very, very good. To compare the damage here, we dealt 369 damage in this turn because we were a bit lucky with the crits, and in average we would deal 346 damage. Okay, up next is our Troll Barb. So I'm drinking the elixir of Cloud Giant Strength because it is important for this build. I wouldn't say there are any super essential gear here, maybe just the throw ring. The risky ring is always good. We're adding items for some extra damage, and we're using the Nairuna spear for throwing damage. Drank a potion to activate my necklace to deal more poison damage, but I'm pretty sure it didn't work in this video, but I'm considering that in the Excel spreadsheet. The problem with the Troll Barb is that they need to get Frenzy when the combat starts, and we are only gonna have 5 trolls and not 6 trolls because of that, because we already used 1 bonus action. You can see here we have a very, very high chance of hitting because of Tavern Brawler and also the advantage ring, the risky ring that we have. We also deal a lot of AoE damage, which is good, of course, but I'm not gonna consider the damage we're not being targeted, but they are considered in the Excel. If you wanna take a look at that as well, I think we dealt about 70 damage just from AoEs in this video, and I wasn't even trying, right, to deal AoE. It was just something that happened. So pretty good here, dealing some pretty good damage. Now I think we're gonna target our last victim here. That enemy is bugged out for some reason, but this one is not, so let's throw at him. And our last attack here, hopefully we can kill them. I think so, only 25 life, we just dealt 40 damage, and we dealt a critical hit, so a lot of damage here. So this build, at the end, they dealt 227 damage in the demonstration, and in average it would deal 254 damage, so we were a bit unlucky this time. That unfortunately means that the Troll Barb will be the lowest damage dealer in this video, but that might be because they need to get frenzied before the combat starts, missing 1 attack. So here we have the dual crossbow build. 3 levels of fighter, rogue and bard, typical damage dealing items, increasing our critical chance to more than 50% with advantage, and the knives just to increase the crit range. The crossbows, the best +2 crossbows there are. And here I'm cheating a little bit, okay, I drank an oil of accuracy just to maximize a little bit more this build, because the 2-hit chance, if we get close to the targets to make them vulnerable, will be very, very low, because we're gonna lose our advantage, right? Maybe one way to improve this build even further is not taking the sharpshooter feat and just getting close to the target so you can have double damage for piercing and more 2-hit chance, right? In this case, I'm using the sharpshooter feat, and you can see here 40 damage with an offhand attack. Not bad, not bad at all. As I said, more than 50% chance of critting. I think we crit a couple times in this clip, and even without getting close to the target, we deal a lot of damage, right? Here, probably more than 60 or 70 damage, very, very good. So with this build, we got 369 damage in the demonstration. And the average damage for this build would be 328 to 561, depending if you're applying vulnerable to the enemies or not. The most likely result would be something between that, but the full potential, if you hit every shot, would be 561 damage, and let me tell you, this is not even the highest damage that we're gonna have. Next up, we have our Warlock build. As you can see, we're maximizing charisma and crit chance with our gear. And this build was tricky because it is completely broken right now because of the gloves we're using, the Raider Clash gloves. It is firing many more rays than it should. So in the video here, you're gonna see we fire 17 rays in the round. And normally, even if we assume that the glove would give us 1 extra ray, it would be 12 rays. Normally, it would be 9 rays. That's why the build with this build gets kind of crazy. But to be honest with you, I don't like this build whatsoever because I think you lose a lot by going 2 levels of Warlock. Unfortunately, Warlock, in terms of casting spells, is the worst by far. Because if you go 2 levels of Warlock, you're gonna limit your ability to have level 6 spell slots, and that limits your build quite a lot. So even though if you wanna maximize the Eldritch Blast damage, this is the way to go. I don't like it because it just becomes a one-trick pony, and I prefer to have like an archer or something like that that can deal similar amount of damage and do other things for the party. Or a caster, right? A full-out caster that can cast double chain lightnings, for example. That's a very fun build, and I think a little bit more flexible than this one. But it does deal a lot of damage. In total, we fired 17 rays and dealt 415 damage in the video. And in average, you would expect, if you would have only the normal rays, 12 rays, dealing 267 damage. So a little bit broken this build, but in any case, very, very strong. So next on the list, we have the Orin Wannabe, the Dual Daggers build. Just drank a potion to activate the amulet. And as you can see here, we need a lot of Act 3 items in this build. and it doesn't really shine without these items. So I wouldn't recommend this as an early game build or just a build to go through the game. Maybe I would recommend this build end game if you find out these items here and want to be really strong, but it isn't even the strongest build at the end game. The Crimson Dagger is super important here because it deals +7 piercing damage in every single attack, obviously with your main hand. And since we're applying Vulnerable to the enemies, it's basically +14 damage. So you can see 2 bonus actions here, we already killed the mage. And now something really weird is gonna happen. We have a very high chance to hit. And here the damage was doubled a little bit, I'm not sure why. We dealt 28 piercing damage just because of the dagger we have, so the Red Vein Savagery ability. In Action Surge, we're pretty much done with this fight. So, with the 51% crit chance we have, we dealt 303 damage with this build in this turn, which is lower than average. The average should be 347 damage, applying Vulnerable to the enemies, right? Without applying Vulnerable, without using this special armor, we will deal 223 damage. So finally, we have the Paladin Bard Fighter build, one of my favorite builds in this game. And as you can see here, this build, differently than the other one, is very, very good since the beginning of the game. Obviously the gear I have here is late game, but you can find some good gear early game as well. And we just smite the crap out of everything. One thing that is very important for this build is the Savage Attacker feat, because we're going to be rolling a lot of dice, especially with our smites. As you can see here, 65 damage with our smite. And we can deal up to, I would say, 10d8 damage, so if we max out 80 damage just by max level smiting. So pretty strong build. Besides this can cast a lot of spells, you have a lot of bardic inspirations as well, and we just deal a lot of damage even without critting, but if we crit, everything melts. So the smiter dealt 370 damage in this turn, and we even missed a smite at the end, a crit smite, because the target died, so we could have dealt about 430 damage, and in average this build will deal 399 damage per turn. Obviously we're gonna be using a lot of resources, a lot of smites, and action surge, but in any case it is really strong if you wanna just destroy everyone in the first turn. Okay, at last we have the Titan String Bow build. I'm just quickly showing the items here because they are the same items we use for the dual crossbow build, obviously changing the bow for the Titan String Bow, and I'm using the Frost Giant Strength gloves. I don't know why, I think because I wanted to use the Elixir of Vigilance, but if you want to deal even more damage with this build, you can use the Flawed Dusk gloves to add some fire damage to your attacks. And you can drink a Cloud Giant Strength Potion, okay? But even without that, we just wreck everything with this build. I can just say it's all around better than the dual crossbow build. We even have some lower level spells here if you want to use them. And unfortunately here we're gonna miss. We have Guided Strike as well to help us hit if we're gonna miss. But we have a pretty good hit chance if we're far away from the enemies. If you get close, you're gonna apply Vulnerable, but you have more chances of missing, right? Here I'm just gonna back off to finish this enemy and add damage to the Fist of Eostre. Not sure how to pronounce that. Critical hit, pretty lucky. As I said, this build is pretty good. I would say it's better than the dual crossbow, maybe early game because the bonus action attacks are really important. Maybe the dual crossbow will be better then, but at late game you're gonna see the damage wise in this build is just better. With the Titan String Bow, we dealt 326 damage in this turn, even missing one attack, and the average damage we would deal without applying Vulnerable would be 335 damage, and the max potential with Vulnerable would be 627 damage. As you have seen, this was a very close battle. From the 7 strong contenders we had, we got 3 winners for our damage comparison. The build that did the most damage in the demonstration turn was the one and only Eldritch Blaster. The only reason this happened was due to the Crater Flash gloves, which made us fire 17 rays instead of 12, but it dealt a whopping 415 damage while being a bit lucky with the crits. So let's take advantage of this build before the gloves get patched, if they do someday, and if we fire normal rays, this build would deal an average of 267 damage, being far from the best in this list, but still pretty strong. So play a Warlock if you want to do so, they are very solid builds. For the mathematical spreadsheet winner, with an average of 399 damage per turn, my favorite build, the Barbading. In our demonstration, it did only 370 damage because unfortunately the target died before we could apply our final smite, but I love this build because of its versatility. It is very tanky and it gets up to level 5 spell slots. The downside of course is that it spends a lot of resources to deal this kind of damage. Don't get me wrong, it's still pretty strong without its high level spell slots, but it truly shines when it can dish out the 10d8 Divine Smites. For the highest damage potential, we have the Titan String Amazon. Since unfortunately we cannot use use parallel stakes to make enemies vulnerable anymore, at least in honor mode, the Titan String Amazon has the biggest damage potential with an absurd of 628 average damage if the targets are vulnerable. And assuming that you can hit every shot, and this is a very big assumption. In any case, I think this build or a similar one deserves a spot in pretty much every party, and if you want to make it more predictable and maximize the hit chance, you can always use the Deadshot instead of the Titan String. Or even, it pains me dearly to say it, don't use the Sharpshooter feat. You will already deal an enormous amount of damage if the target is vulnerable. But the best thing you can do, if you want this build in your party, is to make someone else in the party use the Balist armor to apply vulnerable to the enemies and shoot from afar with the Titan String Amazon, as you're seeing in the video here. I'm sure I'll do this in my next honor mode playthrough, and I'll let you know how it went. My first and only honorable mention has to go to the Monk. I've heard a lot on how overpowered the Monk was in this game, but prior to making this video I haven't played with them at all. But now I finally understand where the hype comes from. The Monk's damage is crazy. It was the highest damage dealer, not considering the extra actions and the vulnerable condition, which means it is a very consistent damage dealer and it basically doesn't spend any resources. Just the key points and action surge, which are restored upon short resting. You can basically use all your key points every battle, no problem at all. Besides that, it is a very strong build since the start of the game, getting really strong at level 4 when we get our Tavern Brawler feat. It is fairly squishy in the build I created, but I'm sure there are ways to remedy that without losing too much damage. For the dishonorable mention, we have the dual daggers Orin wannabe build. I thought this build would be really good due to the Balist armor, but even with that, it dealt subpar damage, so early game this build is terrible because you don't have access to the equipment it needs, and late game it is kind of average. So basically don't use this build unless you want to roleplay. But let me know in the comments if I could have done something to make this build better. And here are the two charts that summarize the damage of every build, considering no extra actions and one extra action. In the spreadsheet you can find the numbers for more extra actions, but the story doesn't change too much. Feel free to pause the video to take a closer look at them. That's it, my dudes and dudettes. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a lot of work to do, but it was extremely fun at the same time. Please consider leaving a like and subscribing if you want to see more videos like this. The channel is brand new, so it would mean a lot to me. And if you want to learn more about how to be overpowered in Baldur's Gate 3, check out this video here. And please comment down below what video you want to see next. I'm considering making a similar video with different high level builds or with lower level builds, such as level 5 or level 9. Comment which video you think would be the most interesting one. Cheers!